Good evening. Welcome to the Comprehensive Plan Committee meeting. It is November 2nd, 2022. I am Kayla, I am co-chairing, and I am calling this meeting to order. First thing on our agenda tonight is approval of October 5th meeting, or the minutes of our October 5th meeting. And I'm looking for a motion to approve unless there's discussion. Brad?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, and all those who approve? All right, and that passes. Okay, next thing is Election Day survey. So a small team comprised of myself, Frank, Danelle, and Brad met a few times over the past month and came up with sort of the process of how we will approach people on Election Day. So we've created a couple graphics, one of which should be in your packet. That is the one, it says on the top of it, it's blue, it says Raymond tomorrow, and it has sort of categories underneath. And I'm hoping just to get a little bit of feedback. There's still time to edit this if anybody has suggestions. And the plan is to print this very large on the town's plotter. I think 36 by 24 is
I can probably
larger
go
size.
That's one of them. I think I can go bigger than that if need be, but that might be as big as you need.
And then to collect votes, it's a little show and tell, jars or something of the like, and little pom-poms that people can grab and vote for their choices. So hopefully that will work out nicely. We also, as you know, we did a sign-up sheet that everybody can sign up for coverage. The goal was to have 2 people if possible. There is a couple things left, I think, to decide whether we want to have 2 stations or not, if we feel that that's necessary. And I kind of would lean on you, Sue, for that kind of input. And then the last thing that we put together is this Raymond Tomorrow handout. You have it all in color. I just finished that this morning. So looking for just input or any changes that anybody would like to see on that. And we also will have a sign-up sheet for people to give us their name and their email address. So to sort of start our own kind of, not listserv, that's not what I want to say, but group, email group of people who want updates. So that's, I don't know if any of the other members have something to add, but I think I've pretty much covered the gist of it.
Yeah, I think you did.
One thing Don did mention that he would like to see one of the components be sustainability, which is something I could add. And I believe he was, I could definitely fit it on the handout very easily, sort of right here, if that's a component we would like to have. But that was a suggestion that Don had made.
Is that somehow different than natural resources? Or could they be tied together?
I kind of feel like they're similar. I think one could argue that while they are similar, they are also very different. But I'm not sure, but that's
maybe natural resources and sustainability. Maybe that could all be
kind of grouped together.
One.
Yeah, for what people will use to vote, I could definitely add sustainability under like sort of those categories under natural resources. And I could probably make it its own little space here on components, but I think that that also might mean that people are expecting sustainability to be one of the actual components of our plan. So we might be sort of jumping the gun a little bit, but that was a suggestion.
I feel like it is in a bunch of these smaller categories, right? There's sustainability components to roads and sewers and waterways, to land use policies, building materials, and the housing and the natural resources. So I definitely think it should be on here. I don't have an opinion on where it should go for the voting.
we could use it as a descriptive word for all of these. So instead of using it as an extra category, wrap it into establishes direction on policies that are sustainable, you know, yada, 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 get it?
Sustainable policies.
Yeah, so, because I agree with you, John, I think it hits into more than one category.
Do we need to make a definition of sustainability? It's kind of a widely used term without any real specifics, at least in my mind.
I mean, I think for the purposes of just having something to hand out, I mean, we're looking to give participants and our citizens something, you know, so I'm not sure how exact per se that this needs to be. I just think what's on it should be accurate. You know, I think that's my main goal, is that, you know, we will dive deeper into these things, but I want the goal to be that there's no glaring inaccuracies in this. Spelling is correct, that the descriptions are accurate. I guess that's sort of what I'm looking for. And any feedback I can, you know, we don't have to really discuss it now. You can just write it down and I can just gather it at the end of tonight and go home with it. And yes, Peter?
Yeah, I just agree with Greg as far as if we're having a little trouble wrestling with sustainability, then we might be confusing the public with it. I thought the idea of this at first was to stay as simple as possible. I'm just thinking in terms of one of us standing there and a citizen coming up and saying, what do you mean by sustainability? And if that's the case and it's on here, then we should all be consistent. I mean, the others, municipal services, natural resources and the like, I think are all pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
I appreciate where Don's coming from, and certainly that is part of the comprehensive plan. It's one of the elements is to address sustainability, but I think that might be down the road a little bit.
Well, either that or maybe it almost like would be another category below housing. Sustainability of the above. Just a thought.
Are these categories supposed to mirror these categories?
Not precisely.
Okay.
They're more to mirror what
Sections in the comprehensive plan? Okay.
Yep, I looked at the 2004 comprehensive plan and grabbed components from it to stick it in here. There were a couple components that I sort of skimmed over, like demographics. I didn't think that needed to be on our little handout.
Sure.
Yeah. But I guess you know, I wanted just something simple, you know, like Peter said, that we can hand out, that's clear, that's understandable, that it really isn't going to be leaving people with a lot of questions when they take this and put it in their paper pile and may or may not look at it again, I'm not sure.
Right.
Yeah. And I think, yes, Brad?
No, keep going, but when you finish, I just wanted to add something.
Yep, absolutely. And then I almost forgot, but it's at the very bottom. I think we need to sort of decide on a email address. So we have Raymond tomorrow. Sue had thought of CompPlan.
Yeah, I just asked Kevin to set that up so we'd have something to start with.
Okay.
And
yeah.
he was actually setting it up like 10 minutes ago.
Oh, CompPlan. And then Brad had another idea, which I thought was actually really good to sort of shorten it up a little bit, was just our tomorrow. So instead of Raymond tomorrow, our tomorrow, which is sort of a play on the idea that this is all of ours tomorrow. So I like that as well. But I can easily sort of fix that. So I don't know if anybody has preference or opinion on that.
I like our tomorrow.
I like it as well.
Yeah, I do like that.
Are you saying R as in the letter R?
The letter
Yeah.
R,
Okay.
but because it's...
Because it could mean both.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yep, and it shortens it up, so it's not this very long email address.
And it is .org.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So I think it sounds like we're all in agreement over the R tomorrow. So I will make that adjustment on this before I send it to Sue, our printer. All right, Brad?
I'm not sure really how to name this category or what it is, but to me it's something that we ought to be talking about in the next couple of years, and that is how do we attract and retain younger people and younger families in the community, and secondly, The state of Maine is, I think everybody here knows, is as far as age-wise, chronologically, we're the oldest state in the country by a full year over the next oldest. And Raymond also has an aging population. And I think, you know, conversations around that of how do we help people stay in their homes or stay in this community who want to remain in the community as opposed to having to leave the community is something that really should be a part of this plan. And I think the two could probably go together even though they're different, but they have to do with keeping people in the community. And so I would just throw that out as I think it's a major area we ought to be covering with everything else that we're talking about. But I'm not sure what to call it or anything else.
Sustainability.
Exactly.
Peter?
Yeah, Kayla, I guess in looking at the election day, the Raymond tomorrow, we've kind of bolded that right at the top, and then the first line is a comprehensive plan sets forth a vision of goals, vision and goals for the future. You know, emphasizing that, I agree with Brad, to anyone. So I don't know if that's something that could be capitalized or underlined or whatever, just to emphasize, you know, future, to try and engage a little bit, maybe some of the younger individuals.
Okay. Easy fix. All right, any further discussion on the handouts and the survey graphic?
So this would be a takeaway?
That would be the takeaway.
Okay.
That would be
6 jars in
printed
front.
large with maybe like a little jar right beside it and a little bowl of pom-poms for voting.
So, you know, for people that are going to be at Election Day, you know, I imagine there may be some people that see this and instantly know what they want to support, but I mean, some people may have questions about, well, what do you mean by, you know, this or that or whatever. You know, is there anything that we want to discuss as a group as far as things that we feel like, I mean, I know that there's subcategories in here, but, you know, I mean, how in depth should we kind of discuss with voters about what each one of these topics really means or what it means to them, I suppose. Do we want to leave it up to them and say, you know, we want to hear from you about what that means from you?
Peter?
Yeah, I agree. And I'm wondering if, because I know Frank has recently done this at an election, as far as you know, forwarding a program and engaging the citizens. Once again, concentrating on keeping it short and simple. But, and I know time is short, the election's next week, but should there be a short script so everyone that's signed up from the committee is going to have some sort of a short script, just if someone engages us, and hopefully people will, that we're all consistent, that we're all accurate, and that we do it short and sweet, so they're not, you know, tapping their foot and saying, I didn't ask for, you know, the whole deal on comprehensive plans, but what does this mean?
I think we can also direct them back to the website and to the 2004 comprehensive plan, because it's really only when you start to read that you understand the extent of what we're doing as a group. So I think we can kind of hit on all of these hot topics and say speak about what's important to us, what's important to them, and us as a community, and then say, we'd love for you to stay engaged and be involved. Here's a great place to start, and here's my contact information. Feel free to reach out.
That's great. Yeah. So it's really very, very little bit as far as scripting is concerned, but I agree, referencing them to what's already online on the town website, and it easily accessible, which this is.
Right. I'm hoping this also helps a little bit. Like, what is a comprehensive plan?
Sure.
What are some of the components?
Yeah.
You know, it's possible to maybe come up with a short script to sort of combine with these things, but I'm hoping this sort of helps
Sure.
at the
I
same
mean,
time.
if we would use this as a script, I think that will work. I mean, hit any key points here, and then we're all consistent.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so is the consensus that we can sort of use this handout as our script?
Yeah, and use the former comprehensive plan as a reference if they want to learn more or get into more detail
And
about any.
I'm sorry, maybe we have a copy of a few old plans, a few copies of the old plan there, so we can just say, hey, here, look at it. This is what we mean when we're talking about these categories, if they really are interested, but it's a good resource.
Is that possible, Sue, that maybe we could get like one?
Going
It's
out,
quite
I don't,
large.
I was gonna say, I know it's long, I'm going out and pulling it up. I wanna say, yeah, it's 135 pages.
Maybe the first couple pages where it shows the, at least the index? Not the index, but
The table of contents.
table of contents? Something just to show like a little bit more in-depth. Sean?
I only have one problem with referring them to either the website or the plan, is that we're trying to keep that line moving, and for them to kind of even look at the first couple of pages of a massive plan is how that's going to influence their decision of, you know, especially consistency. Is okay, municipal services might mean something different to one person versus the other. Like, I think we're all consistent here, but that might be something totally different where if there was just a brief description, no, it doesn't have to be a description, just a couple points in there of what it is that goes in that. I think that's kind of important to keep the message consistent for people coming and voting. That way they don't have to spend a lot of time reading the plan or even looking over a lot of stuff before they're dropping their votes in the jar.
Well, and I think that's where this blue handout kind of comes in handy. Like if it's the printout, I mean, under, you know, municipal services, it's got public safety, public works, recreation, town office, taxes, library. So it kind of breaks it down into general.
So refer them more to the, if this is going to be the board, right? This is going to be the big printout. So, okay, so then referring them to that, I think, is probably the best way to stay consistent.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the goal being, just to stay focused on this whole process as far as election day, is I believe it's to get voters aware that this is taking place and there's more to come. And that too, what are the three most important things for you as far as the future?
Gets them thinking.
Get them thinking that real quick. It's, you know, is it natural resources? Is it housing? Is it transportation? What is it? That was the goal, right?
Yeah.
For this first brief type of a thing.
Yeah, it gets them thinking and allows them some investment in the beginning of this process.
Well, and if I may, if you're going to have that as a handout for them, you can say down here is an email address. If you have more thoughts or want to ask more questions, send it to this email.
And I guess we could insert at the election real quickly too. And if someone really shows interest, say, you know, the message board is still looking for volunteers as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Actually, one thought, Kayla, real quick, I didn't notice it before, but transportation under the components isn't a part of the blue. If we're gonna put it under the components, we should probably put it in the blue categories, one of the blue categories too.
What are we missing? Oh, infrastructure.
Yeah, I can stick that word under infrastructure
Great.
maybe.
Yep.
Good catch.
Population too, but we could put that under, I mean, that's a couple different ones.
Well, the population's more of a fact-finding mission than a
True. Then a opinion?
policy mission.
Yeah.
Maybe I could put population just under housing. I mean, I know it fits a lot of different things, but I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know. It doesn't it doesn't really fit there either. That is true.
I'm okay leaving that.
But I think
one out.
some parts of the comprehensive plan are there to help guide us and aren't necessarily, I think they can be a little bit separate than the actual vision. They're the population, and we're, you know, we like Brad's point, we want to see younger families stay here.
Yeah.
That's, I think they're slightly two different things. So while it's a component in our plan, it may not necessarily be something one automatically thinks of as a priority.
Right.
Maybe.
Okay. I agree.
Okay.
And just one other quick thought, looking at our website, before you start suggesting that people go to our website to try and find something, I should make it a little more easy to find, because it's not right now. It's kind of buried in committees.
Yep.
And until you had more of a direction, and like you've come up with an R tomorrow, or and have some sort of almost a logo, would be good to put out, to be able to tell people, look for this, it'll be right on the homepage. So right now they have to go to government and town committees and CompPlan committee, and then documents before they find anything.
So am I hearing that that's not really something that's doable by election day?
Unless someone wants to come and process all the absentees for me.
Can we get a QR code?
Yeah, there's an idea. I don't know, I'd have to ask Kevin. But that's not a bad idea.
Could we investigate that? See if we
That's
can do-
a QR code, I
Yeah.
think, will be essential for us when we do our big survey.
Yes.
Because we
Great
want that-
idea.
Yeah, definitely for that. So do you want us to advertise the going to the website yet?
Well, I can talk with Kevin tomorrow and see if he can possibly, either he, Eric, or Kyle do something along that line. It's just, I'm a smidge busy right now. So to be able to say that I could do it would be,
I am optimistic.
Stretching.
I mean, I'd like to be optimistic that everybody that we talk to is going to go right home, get on their computers, and start looking at this right away. But I think realistically, that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
So if they have the material, it's sitting on their counter, they can look at it. But they're probably not going to go right home
Yeah.
and start diving into this.
though I could maybe put just another menu on the front that said CompPlan.
Just to get us by
Just
for
to
right
do,
now.
just to get something in there. I was just trying to think something quick. But it would be nice if you had something more like the Raymond Rex thing, that's a big logo and very obvious.
If Kevin wants to give me access again, I can
Yeah.
probably pull it off.
Probably could. So I'll talk to Kevin tomorrow.
Okay. All right, any other thoughts on this?
The only other thing that I'm thinking is, I wonder if under the housing on this blue handout, if we wanted to put like generational housing or something to that effect to address both the younger and older population that we want to address. I don't know.
I'm trying to think of other ways we say that. Aging in place?
If we want
Staying
to,
in
if we're talking
housing.
about attracting young and also providing options for the elderly, I don't know.
Just trying to think of like a word.
I know.
Intergenerational
Okay.
Oh,
could be.
yeah. I don't know. We don't have to, but I just thought.
No, I think it's a great idea. I just want it to be one word. So I was trying to think of something that sort of captures that I
Right.
can throw in there.
Yeah. Intergenerational might be like wide and encompassing. I don't know.
Okay, well, like I said, any suggestions, you know, if something comes up later on and you go, oh, wait, maybe this, just write it down and I'll just collect it all.
Okay.
So I feel like we've sufficiently sort of covered this. And it looks like I did skip around a little bit on our agenda, so I apologize.
I marked it taken out of order.
So we can go back up to update or plan for tours of Raymond. And as I understand it, there was a bus tour last week, correct? And do we have any, so that, I'm not sure what the, maybe, how did that go? I didn't go, so.
It was a lot of fun.
Was it?
Yeah, it was actually pretty educational. I enjoyed it a lot.
Same, I thought it was very helpful, and everyone I've spoken to about it says, oh, I want to go do that too. So there could be a burgeoning business opportunity. But no,
Side business for Raymond,
Chris could be a
Raymond
tour
Tours.
guide.
I think it gave a really sincere appreciation of where the town has come from, what it's working towards, what its challenges are practically, what we're trying to accomplish. It was great.
Brad, I think you had your hand up.
Yes. I think anybody who was on that tour will agree that that was just an absolutely incredible experience. Not just seeing the tour, but having Dawn around and for the tour, and Chris, who know this town so well, every crevice of it. Oh my goodness, every 500 feet along that tour, one of them had something to share that, I don't know about the rest of you, but almost all of it was, and I'm saying to myself, I wish we could video record this, not just for all of the committee members, but if we didn't have to pay the kind of salaries we have to pay to everybody to get good talent, those guys would be an incredible bus tour group. I mean, we could get the bus tours to this community and people coming in during the summertime for $25 a ride to hear them talk about it. It was just so incredible. And I feel bad for anybody who missed it because it's just a unique opportunity. I think you'll agree, Sue, that, you know, just to hear those guys together and have a group of people that it was something. Oh.
It was a lot of fun, but it was also a lot of town I hadn't seen, and that was interesting in and of itself. But the explanations as we went through of what we were looking at, whether it was a cluster subdivision or the more old-fashioned type of subdivision, was really interesting. And I had no idea that tower was that tall. Oh my goodness! So that was interesting. But we also didn't finish the tour. We only got, what we didn't do was go down Cape at all, or really through the commercial district at all. So we talked about having part 2. I did contact Joe Crocker about getting that set up, but his little one got sick and he was out, so he hasn't been able to get some dates for that. Once I do get that, I could email them out to the committee if you like, and we can see. Or is that something you would rather postpone till spring at this point? I mean, the bus tour could happen whenever. And our bus driver was from Wyndham, Lynn, and she was fantastic.
Really?
She was really good.
That's great. That's great. Peter?
Yeah, Kel, I would echo everything that's been said here about how wonderful it was, and from people that were fairly new to the community to some of us have been here a long time, all learned something. And as you mentioned, Sue, as far as the bus driver from Wyndham, she was raving just that it was done. She said, why don't they do things like this in Wyndham?
Yeah, Raymond, fortunately working with the town, I've gotten, I guess, my own little personal tours of Raymond several times, and it is a lot of fun, especially when you get to go with people who have so much knowledge about almost every single house you pass by, and you know, and I'm sure there was a lot of stories not told, a lot of things not said, but it's, I think Raymond, one thing that I know from my little tours around Raymond is that I think of it as a small town, but it's really big in a lot of ways. And to get from one end to the other, it's quite a journey. And you're going through such a variety of, you know, houses and types of housing, and, you know, to go from North Raymond all the way down to the Cape, it is really something else. Yeah, we have a lot here in our little town. Yeah, well, that's great. I definitely think if you have more information on a part 2 so that the rest can be explored,
Yeah.
probably would be nice.
So I've tried to get with Joe, but he's been catching up. So at this point after the election, I'll get with Joe and
Yeah.
get some dates out.
Okay, that sounds good. Next on the agenda is update on St. Joseph's student intern. And do we have an update on that?
We don't.
Okay.
Or this part of we does not.
Okay.
Would you like me to add that to next meeting's agenda?
Yes. I think also we're all in agreement that having an intern would be great, but we're not quite sure what they do yet. So I think it can be put off for another month to talk a little bit more about it. So we went over the survey already. And next up is review of the draft RFP. Personally, I perused it before our meeting today. I noticed we need to make some decisions on dates and a general timeline. Other than that, I do not have anything else to add to it. So I would say that something we probably want to nail down a little bit more is today is some dates, decide if the RFP looks good in general and whether we'd like to proceed with getting that out.
So, Kayla, I put together just a quick synopsis and looking at the other RFPs, just that I thought this might be quick and dirty for reviewing. I should have gotten to Sue on time so anyone who's remote could see this as well. But basically, if you look at the top, it's basically just the town, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 towns that you actually secured drafts from as examples. And then next to it is the population to give us just some relationship to, you know, what size of a town it is, because it seems like the South Portland, as an example, draft RFP, or actually their final RFP, was something in the vicinity of 40 or 50 pages. And I believe ours is like 9 or 10. And I think that kind of was consistent with the populations. So when we had a question earlier, I mean, are these more involved with larger towns, which means the planner doing more, which means the cost being more? And I'm sure if Don were here, he'd be echoing that. Just so you get a relationship. Then the time frame that was, and you can see it with Raymond, as Kayla's saying, that's still up in the air on the draft. For the time from the bid being issued to the deadline for it to be received. And they range somewhere between the 60 to the 30 days. Once again, I believe the 60 days reflects a larger community that has a larger requirement, so they give the respondents a little bit more time to get there. And then the time frame for the consultant, and I know that was discussed a little bit by the state rep the last time that was talking to us from the planning segment of the town. And those range pretty much from 18 months to as much as, 2.5 years. And I believe in our plan right now, from what the draft, ours is 30 months, 2.5 years. But once again, I believe that has to do with, as the fellow from the state, Tom, said, has to do with how much time you want the planner to be on the payroll versus how much time we actually want to develop the plan. So that doesn't mean that the contract planner has to be there for the whole, let's say, 30 months. Then as far as the compliance, I just listed how that was listed in our draft. It's the Growth Management Act. And it can get as involved as, if you look at SACO, they cite all the things Tom did, which is Title 30, which is the Growth Management Act, Chapter 208, and the checklist. So once again, do we want to consider, when we get our contract planner finally to sign on the dotted line, do we want to emphasize, we want him to comply with all of these? I mean, that's just a thought. Then last, or second to last, I guess, what I found interesting is actually 3 of them, the first 3, actually published a budget. You know, I've kind of, you know, been enough around negotiations with contractors and the like to say, generally, you don't do that. You don't tell them what your budget is, because surprisingly enough, their bid's going to come in $1 less than your budget. I mean, but there may be a reason for that as well. But some others stated it, that it's considered to be a fixed fee, is how it's described, with a not to exceed. So I don't know exactly how we want that to be stated in our draft RFP, but I would strongly recommend that we don't publish a budget. And that gets back to, as far as getting this whole thing rolling, as I understand it, this committee is going to have to propose a budget to the town. So we're going to have some sense of what we think is going to be required to get a quality contract planner, and then I guess let Don do his thing as far as getting it for less. But we've got to at least decide on, you know, what's the not to exceed type figure that we have, but that's got to go into this whole thing, and I believe we have a role in that. And then lastly, the visions, and most of them went, I believe that the state is saying that it should be at least a 10-year vision. So if we were to get this thing rolling and get it through in 2.5 years, then we'd be visioning through you know, 2032, 2033. As you can see, South Portland, they're visioning for 20 years. So once again, all of that would have to be figured into asking the contract planner, you know, how in depth are you going to get this thing? So I just thought this would be a quick and dirty as far as discussing, you know, what our role is. And then I believe there's been quite a discussion on when we get this thing started. Because obviously these dates are all relative. As an example, in the draft, it has us releasing the bid in October. Well, we know that isn't going to happen. That's why it's a draft. But we aren't even going to, I believe, Sue, correct me if I'm wrong, the budget process is January?
It begins in January-ish. It doesn't finish up until town meeting in June.
So we would not have an approved budget until June 23?
I believe you have enough to start.
I believe what Dawn said was we have 10,000.
Yeah.
That as I understand it, that's a carryover.
Yeah.
So in other words, whatever we don't spend this calendar year would go over to the next.
Yes.
But I think those are things that we need also guidance from the municipal side as far as, you know, what do you consider as far as a budget for a contract planner? So this is something where we're kicking it around. I know we're hot to get started with the contract planner, because also as I was reading through this, and I just made some quick notes on it. I mean, in our draft, what it says, which reflects the reality, is that as far as the scope of this committee, that primarily, you know, we're the overseer. But what's very clear in looking at how involved this is, as far as putting together a comprehensive plan, it's the contract planner that basically designs and does a lot of this. So as I'm looking at the components and getting overwhelmed and saying, oh my God, there's so much that's got to be done here. Well, we oversee this, and I believe this committee has all of the capabilities to do that well, to represent the town. But as far as the contract planner is concerned, that individual is going to be the one that's going to really be drafting the plan. That they review the 2000 plan, they review existing codes, policies, demographics, and this is all in our draft. They do the inventory of current resources, analysis of future needs, growth and patterns, population and housing trends, inventory assessment, for resident and commercial growth patterns, the vision statement, which actually is the first part of the 2004, is the first thing. And what the state requires, it's right on the checklist. Number one, this committee has to have a vision statement for this plan. But the contract planner is obviously going to have input into that. But we are the people that will be overseeing that, those comments and saying yay or nay to it, or adding or subtracting from what the contract planner wants. So I just thought, in looking at our proposal, our draft proposal, and juxtapositioning it to these examples, that we get a better sense of what needs to be done. And it sounds to me, I would be surprised if we had a contract planner signed, sealed, and contracted and ready to go by sometime in the spring of '23. That's just my own feeling.
Well, and that's really why I filled in some of the months and years in that schedule that was in York's, I think it was York's RFP, to give some kind of an idea of, this doesn't happen overnight. There are quite a few steps, and to kind of give an idea of this could take months from the time we release the RFP till they actually start work. But that's all I was trying to show with that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Can we get a list of basically these important dates so that we can work backwards from them? I think that might be the most effective for trying to figure out when we need to release the RFP.
Are you referring to like when would we be able to get a budget approved kind of thing?
Right.
Is that what you mean? Like, I mean, obviously we
Yeah.
can't accept a contract. We don't even know how much money we have to spend.
Right.
Right. It would be helpful. The one time Dawn's not here to help us sort of hash through this. Yeah, maybe if we were, I think, yeah, that does make sense. We need to know what parameters we are allowed to work within before we can really determine a timeline. And working backwards from that, like when is the soonest we could say yes and have money to back that yes up with?
Or know
and then working
how
back.
much that money is.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah.
Because I think that's going to dictate a lot of
Brad
these
keeps raising
timelines.
Brad's got his hand up.
Brad?
Well, sure. I'd just like to, I mean, you didn't think you were going to get it through a meeting without some controversy from me, did you? And I guess I'm looking at this a lot differently from what I've heard of the discussion here so far. And the reason I'm doing that is because the planner is the one who should be doing so much of what we've talked about in this. It doesn't matter to me. I'm not pointing fingers at people. I'm just pointing fingers at the process. But I got through about 9 pages of this RFP draft that was sent out to us, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is just, you know, I'll just give you one example. And again, I'm not pointing fingers at people. I'm pointing fingers at this process of the way we're approaching this. But in here it says Sebago Lake is the second largest lake in New England. It's not. It says it's 29,992 acres. It's not. And I'm just pulling that apart as one small area that it's just filled with things that people need to go through the way we're approaching this, that I don't want my name, and I would hope nobody else on this committee wants their name on stuff that's not factual, to go around and tell people that, hey, Sebago Lake is the second largest, you know, and when that's not true. And I don't know what else is in here. I got through this, I started rewriting it, and I'm like, okay. The way I've been involved in a lot of comprehensive plans. I've been involved in one municipal one, which I think is as much as anybody, including Dawn, have been involved, and maybe Dawn's been involved in 2. But I've been involved in a lot of plans, and you know, that and 50 cents, that and $3.50 will get you a cup of coffee today. But what I will say is I've never been in a comprehensive planning committee where we've gone on August, September, October, November, and not had a planner. The planner is one of the first things that every planning, and I've been involved in close to a dozen of these over a variety of organizations. It's one of the first things that you do. And the planner will guide us through this. Greg, you were with us on the last plan back in 2002. I think we started as a committee in 2001. I believe, and we didn't go out for bid. Now, I don't know if something has changed. Excuse me. We went out for bid. We didn't do a general RFP, and I don't know if something's changed in town regulations of Raymond that has required that. There is no state requirement that requires us to go out to bid like that. It would only be, Sue, if you could check with Joe Bruno or Don and see if there's a reason to do it. But the way I would approach this, and again, just listen to a guy with some experience, and you can say, yeah, well, I'll take the $3.50 for a cup of coffee rather than your advice, McCurtain. But I would put together a task force of this committee. And I know there are people who have some experience and interested. I'm not particularly interested, but if we don't have enough people for the task force, I'm happy to serve on that task force. The state has a list of planners out there. It might or might not be up to date. They're a little behind also, but there are probably 20 to 30 planners who can do this sort of thing. You can X out X number of firms that are in Bangor or something because we want somebody who can attend some of our meetings. There are probably 20 potential planners out there. I don't think we want to go to Massachusetts. We certainly don't want to go to the people that Kennebunk used in Florida, wherever he was. We want somebody who's probably within an hour drive who can attend maybe half the meetings and maybe do half by Zoom to save us a little money. But that planner should be at every one of our meetings, should be at these neighborhood meetings and so forth, and they should be helping us with where we are right now. And that's why I think if we put together a task force at this meeting or in the next couple of days, I believe that task force could come back to us at our December meeting and say, look, this is what we've looked at on the landscape. We've identified 20 planners who can do this thing, who are interested, and let's just send it to them and give them 2 weeks to do it. I mean, these guys see these plans all the time. They don't need a month to look at it. We don't need 2 months to put it out to bid and see who comes in after advertising. We just don't need to do that. I don't understand why we keep, we need to do this, we need to do that. We don't. The planner should be one of the first things that we do on this committee is hiring that planner.
Brad, sorry, Peter?
Yeah, I hear you, Brad, and not to take aim at any one individual or anything, but what I think I'm hearing is, number one, maybe what you're suggesting is we convene this committee too soon, and number two, to start engaging planners when we can't pay them is that they will start giving us advice gratis. And I don't see those things happening. Number three, and finally, my understanding is that comprehensive plans are all different. As Dawn mentioned before, at a previous meeting, the larger municipalities basically have planning offices. They don't do comprehensive plans because they're planning all the time. And so, sure, you go from that to a population of 4,500 in a municipality where it's primarily, I believe, they're looking at a citizen committee to do a lot of this legwork up front in order to at least be able to say, when we have a planner, well, this is our draft vision. What would you recommend as far as the vision is concerned? And quite honestly, we're talking right now about an RFP. So whether Sebago is the second or the 17th largest state in New England for an RFP, I don't see that as an issue. Those are my thoughts.
Well, I just pulled the Sebago Lake because it was something I ran into early on, and it's like, if we've got that one wrong, what else do we have in here? And again, I'm not pointing fingers at the process, but I am talking about small communities when I say this. When we did our plan back in 2002, we interviewed other communities that had done plans and we had GP Cog helping us a great deal also with assistance on a planner. But I think we were 2 meetings and we were into interviewing planners, and I think we interviewed, GP Cog was offering to do it. Rich Rothy, who we hired, I can't say enough about him. I'm not sure he's the one for us now. But no, they are used to working with small municipalities. Most of the municipalities are small, Peter, just to address that. And the cost of these things is the cost of them. And no, they're not looking for us to have the vision statement and walk in and have this, this, and this, and this for them. They really aren't. They want to be involved in that as early on to, and the last thing we want to do is put all our time into, well, we did this, what do you think? And then, well, it's okay, but, you really should have done it this way. I mean, you talked about give us the date so we can work back from it. They know what the state is looking for, and they know how to work back from that for all of this. And that's why I'm just saying, look, why not put together a task force? Work on it the way you want to, Peter, if you want to. But I see this going into next April, and I've never heard of a community taking that kind of time to do this. It might have happened, and you may be able to pull some examples. But every community I know has had the planner early on. And again, I'm speaking from experience. You're talking from, well, my thinking is, and I'm just speaking from experience.
And I appreciate the experience. I guess I'd ask Greg or you. So if I understand it correctly, in the 2004, within a couple of months, you had a contract planner on board.
Oh, I think we did.
And did you have an approved budget to hire that
I
individual?
honestly don't remember. We must have had one by then.
I would think you must have had it. We don't have a budget.
Peter, just a point. I did talk to Dawn. We can only do a year at a time, as you know. And we do have money. Sue, you might know what that is, and if you don't, not a problem. But Dawn knows what the dollar amount is. In fact, I asked it, I think, at that June meeting we had about a budget. And there is money in this fiscal year's budget to get it started, but we can only, I don't believe the town can contract 2 or 3 years worth of budgetary money in one session. Maybe we can, but that was not my understanding. I think we have to do a year at a time.
Okay, so I think it would be helpful, number one, to get some input from those who actually know what our capabilities are. We have $10,000 right now. That's
my understanding.
That I'm pretty sure that that's what we have right now in our bucket that we can use right now today if we wanted. But I think that the way that money is allocated in this town, that maybe it's possible that in 2004 for that comprehensive plan that a budget maybe had already been established and approved. But I think that we still, no matter what, have to know what our budget is. So I think that whether that means we propose one, right? We look at other towns and say we propose that we spend no more than this on our planner. But I think we need the input of that, and we need to know, I mean, I'm fairly certain that this would have to be approved, but maybe not prior. Maybe there's a magic bucket of money somewhere in Raymond. I don't know. But I think we really need input from someone who would know. So Dawn would be able to tell us, this is the process of how you'll get your budget for your planner approved. So I do think we need that.
Well, part of that I can answer, and that's that the budget, you need to come up with a budget. You need to have an idea of how much you're going to spend, present that to the Budget Finance Committee and to Dawn and Cherie so they can be incorporated into the budget. The Budget Finance Committee would be asking questions. The Select Board would be asking questions. They would decide whether it was going on the town meeting warrant, and then it would be voted in June. Right. Then your money would be available in July. So that part of the sequence I can tell you. The other part I will say is that the town does have a purchasing policy, and you do need to go out to bid for this.
Okay, so I think that answers a few questions. And then one more last thought before I go to you, Peter, is that I also think it might be helpful to have a small task force that sort of just focuses on fine-tuning this RFP, making sure that it is accurate, because I think we all want some level of accuracy. That's my thoughts. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, I move a budget of $40,000 in order to approach a contract planner.
Well, is there a
you want to get off the dime? You want to get the attention?
I'll second that.
There you go. Discussion? My sense is that we want to get off the dime and we want to get going, and we need the attention of the town. So what we do is, as a committee, we propose a budget. Is 40,000 adequate? Is it too much? I don't know. But I believe that that would be a way to start things rolling. And we can put together all kinds of subcommittees to look at this in order to get a more accurate number. And, but I'm getting the sense that at least some of us are feeling that we need to expedite this and get off the dime. So that's my proposal. And I've got a second. Anybody else want to talk?
Well, I mean, I guess I've never served on a comprehensive plan committee before. I don't know the timeline. I don't know if we're going as slow as a snail or if we're at a normal pace for a town of our size. And I mean, in my mind, I just got here, if I think about it, to this committee, right? I'm just getting my feet wet. So I don't want to jump the gun per se. I think that we need to know some things first, and I'd like to know those things before we move on. Frank?
This is a very important committee for this town. What's the rush? I guess that's my question. If
Yep.
it takes time to do it right, because most of us are new to this, then we need to take the time. So we develop a plan for 35 rather than 30 or 34 or whatever the number ends up being. I don't have problems not rushing into something. There's a lot of things I don't understand, and it's going to take a while to get it through the head. And I want to be on a committee that does it right. So I'm not in favor of rushing through this just to get to a certain point. If it takes us 2 or 3 extra months to get it up and running, it takes an extra 2 or 3 months to get it up and running.
Is there any other discussion?
I mean, my thought is that we want to be effective with our timing. I don't want to rush either, but I also want to be effective with what we're doing here and when we come and meet with one another. So, I think it makes sense to have a task force or a smaller subcommittee that would, prioritize getting this RFP put together so that we can identify someone that can, give us direction. Are we doing the right things right now? Are we wasting time? I don't know. I don't know. I myself would like to have a more clear vision of what's our next task. What do we want to do? What's the vision? What's the goal in the end? And I think having somebody that can guide us through that process would make our time much more efficient. I do think it's a good idea to prioritize getting someone sooner than later.
Frank, I just want to address your comment. I'm not trying to rush the plan process, just the getting the planner on board. If anything, I'm probably the person on this committee who wants this plan to take as long as it is necessary to make sure we cover all of the bases thoroughly as we evolve. But we're dealing with people here on this committee who are bright. I got to say, I didn't have any municipal experience with plans until I did this. Greg, were you on a previous plan?
Yeah, yes I was. The Comprehensive Plan Committee.
Before 2002?
No, I was on
Yeah.
the Implementation
Yeah.
Committee.
Greg
prior
was
one.
new on it. I think John Rand was new on it, and myself. We're the 3 veterans from that committee. I believe we're the only ones. And I'm trying to think if there was anybody else on that committee who had experience, Frank and Peter. I had experience in doing plans, but never having done a municipal one. And I think Don was pretty new here in town and the whole thing. But we did it. And I got to tell you, this is a smarter committee. I hope nobody from the old committee is listening here, but the people on this committee are smarter. They're engaged. They get great experience in here as a whole. We had some other good people on there who aren't on this committee, but we go around the table with that group, and we had 13 people at the meeting. One person would start, another opinion from the next person, another opinion completely different from the next. by the time you got around to that original person, they had changed their opinion again, and we just weren't getting anywhere. And that's where the planner helped us tremendously, just, getting us focused on what our mission was. And again, that plan we started it in 2001, and you see the date on it, it was 2004. So it took part of 2001, all of 2002, 3, and into 2004. So, I don't know. I think a task force can get a lot more done than a group of 10 or 12 who.
Yeah, I withdraw my motion.
I was going to ask if you would like to recall your motion, because there's still a motion now. I really would like, it doesn't bother me if we want to set up a little task force tonight, next month, that doesn't bother me. But I still think in the end, we can't input any of those dates until we have a clear idea of our budget process, which you have told us, some of those. But I think that that is our biggest hurdle to not being able to have someone in this room right now, is that we don't know how much we can pay somebody to do this. So I really think that since that is our hurdle, to having a contract planner right this minute, we have to get through that first. And
I think Jackie said this as well. The RFP will, in a sense, give you that. The proposals coming back will tell you how much you need to budget, or at least give you some ideas. And this, I literally threw together, didn't even read as I was throwing it together, to be truthful with you, because I have a lot of other things going. Having some of the committee members go through the RFP and get it to have all these pieces that it really does need to have for our size town would be correct. And I think that's, at least from my outside point of view, is something that the committee could accomplish now. Get the RFP sent out. That doesn't mean they need to start next week. They might not be able to start for 6 months. You don't know when someone would be able to take us on. So to me, at least, it seems like getting the RFP to the point that you're ready to have it sent out and get that going might be a thought.
I'm sorry, I'll go back just 1 second. I'm just thinking out loud. So that means theoretically, we would not be able to issue notice of award, execute contract, and start project work as far as the planner is concerned until July 1st?
If it fit within your $10,000 budget, you could.
Well, even if we did most of all the work ourselves, I still don't think that will fit into our $10,000 budget.
I move that the committee accept the draft RFP.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Any discussion on that?
I actually think we should put together the task force, and I think we should have a few people review this and just get this really nice and tight before we send it out, and have it ready to go for approval at next meeting.
I second that. Is that a motion?
Well,
I
we
don't know.
would vote to.
There's a motion on the floor.
So yeah, there's a motion, so we would have to vote on that first. So is there any further discussion on, right now, I think we're kind of deciding whether we're going to accept as is, or we're going to have so if you vote no,
Yes.
you are voting to probably put together a
Task force.
task force.
Yeah,
Sorry, I'm trying to get it out.
Just to continue discussion a little bit, obviously it sounds like the conundrum is that getting this thing started is first us reviewing and approving the draft RFP. Okay? This is now the second meeting where we have reviewed the RFP. So maybe a subcommittee is necessary to be formed, with the goal being that our goal is to approve at the November meeting the draft RFP, or we could approve it now as it is, and that would get us to the next step, which is basically to get the RFP issued. Then that accomplishes the release date. Looking at the examples that we have from the other RFPs, 30 days or 60 days, whatever we decide, along with the town, that would be a reasonable amount of time for a deadline for all submissions or bids to be in. Then we would get the information, as I understand it, as far as what this is going to cost. And so by approving as soon as is practical this draft RFP, because it seems like right now it's stuck here. The only other observation I would make is this. As far as timeliness and as far as how much has been accomplished, I know we go in terms of looking at meetings, and I know Brad has a concern with how many meetings. I look at more in the terms of right now, we're at about 7 hours of work so far on this. And I believe we've accomplished quite a bit in that time, but that's my own personal opinion. 7 hours. Now, this is a volunteer committee. We could certainly accomplish a lot more if we met weekly. I don't hear any motion for that. Is there a motion for that?
I got enough meetings.
I guess we have a motion on the floor, so I'll wait. Maybe there'll be a motion after this one is resolved. But 7 hours into it, maybe 8 by the time we're done. And so all I'm trying to do with these motions, whether it's a motion to approve dollars or to a motion to approve this RFP, I would be happy with in order to move things along. So that's basically my rationale for the 2 motions that I've made. I have nothing more to discuss with this. If I get a sense, I'll withdraw it.
Brad?
I would be, Peter, I'd be in favor of your motion if, let me just throw this out because it is discussion, to accept this pending review by a task force. As I say, I just looked at several pages and I found a lot of errors that I don't think, knowing you as I know, and I have a great deal of respect for everybody on this committee, and especially for all the town staff, Sue and Chris and Don. I just don't think you want this going out with incorrect information as being factual. And I think that if we put a task force on it, and again, I'm happy to work on it if we don't have if other people don't or whatever. But I think if we took, one person took several pages, another person took several pages on a task force, came back, and I think by mid-month, we could present something back to everybody, and just by consent, are you okay with this? In other words, if we could do a friendly amendment to your motion, Peter, of accepting it pending, a final draft from our task force that would be appointed at this meeting, and then we could email it and not have to wait till December to get a final approval on. Does that sound like something we could all agree on or not?
I would withdraw my motion.
Oh, okay. I cannot say that I agree to pass it right now as is because it's got dates that don't make any sense in it.
Right.
So, that's just my thoughts. But I know that that's been withdrawn now. I get a sense, because I don't think we need to continue really to go on this too much longer here, is that maybe having a few people just give it a look over is the best way to go with the goal, and we'll get some input on the exact dates, like what are we working for that we can input into that, and approve this at our next meeting to go out.
Is that a motion?
That's my to is to create a small task force to look over the draft RFP, to finalize dates and check for errors and bring to us next meeting. I know it's a very long motion.
I'll second it.
That's my motion. All right. Any discussion? Okay, and all those in favor? And that passes. Okay. So I guess then the next thing is who wants to do that? Who's going to take that? Brad?
I will. Somebody who I think would be really good on this task force is John Rand, and I know he's not here, and that's all the more reason why I think we should nominate him in his absence. I've spoken with John about this, and he has some. I think he can add a lot to that task force.
Okay, and John,
Yeah.
you said you'll do it.
Two Johns and a Brad.
Two Johns
There
and
you
a
go.
Brad.
That's plenty.
Sean?
Yeah, I think I'll help out with that. I know it's probably getting larger than, but I think for this many pages, it probably, to break it up might be the best thing.
Okay.
So I would volunteer for it.
All right. And that, if John R. objects, he can take himself out, I suppose.
No, I can't.
No, I can't.
He won't. He probably won't.
Okay.
So I'll send the Word document to the 4 of you tomorrow.
Great.
Okay. I'm happy to announce that we are moving on.
This is healthy.
Sorry, there's a lot of pages in here. I gotta scroll all the way back up. Yeah, I'm not there yet. Okay, new business. Formalized process for committee internal communications. I guess I'm not seeing any issue with how we're doing it so far. I think via email is working for me. I don't know if this is alluding to how we communicate with town staff as well. And I think under normal circumstances, you would direct all questions to Peter and I,
Yes.
and we would forward to the town.
That's
and,
correct.
And who we feel would be appropriate.
No.
No, for Dawn.
To Dawn.
To Dawn.
And maybe in this case, Dawn and Chris.
Okay.
And if I could be CC'd, so if they're not there, I know how to
You can,
yeah,
okay.
proceed. But,
All right.
I mean, you could send it to all 3 of us, but Dawn would probably be the one getting through.
Okay.
Because otherwise, especially with 9 of you on the committee, you 3 of you might come up with a question and one decide that Nathan needs to answer it, and another one that Sue needs to answer it, another one that Sharice needs to answer it. So we're all running around after the same answer. So we try and keep all committees sending all their communications through Dawn.
Okay. Peter.
Yeah, so I believe this was my agenda item that I asked for. So that was one. It was referring to the email that hopefully everyone received from Sue regarding how to contact town staff. So that's been addressed. There's also, as I see it now, there is an active committee email address, comp.plan@raymondmaine.org. And is that basically, you sent that out, Sue, is that basically just, it has all of us on it, so we can hit that when we're sending a query or a communication?
I wasn't sure how you wanted to use that, so Kevin has set it up.
But it hasn't been activated.
But it hasn't been activated, other than all emails are going to be forwarded to me, just to give
Yeah.
somebody that in case somebody
Sure.
stumbles onto it.
But am I correct in assuming that this email, if we click on that, it captures the entire committee with all the emails?
It could, if that's the way if you want to use that one as your, but there is one thing that needs to be kept in mind, and that's if you're discussing committee business in email, that can be an illegal meeting.
Correct.
So you have to be careful with
Yeah.
what you're doing.
And I had that as far as in here, as far as our communications, they could be FOIA'd.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, very much so.
So we're all aware of that, right? Anything that we do put in this is a public hearing, public
Yes.
meeting. That's why we have minutes that have to be voted on, and it means that the public has access to everything that we do in this meeting. I don't know if, my understanding when I was on the Zoning Board of Appeals is that more than 2 of us getting together at any one time is an illegal meeting.
Yes, it is.
So that also is something to keep in mind. So I can reach out to Kayla and talk to her about something, but I can't reach out to Kayla and Frank, because now that constitutes a legal meeting, and there are liabilities involved with that. So we're all aware of that. So as far as formalizing these communications, I'm almost done, Brad.
Okay.
As far as the documents page, the content / comprehensive - plan - committee is basically the email that will bring anyone to our resource site or to our documents that are on the web. Is that correct?
That what will take
That's
you there,
our,
I'm
so
sorry.
yes, that's our web address. That
Right.
bring up, that
Yes.
would bring some, instead of having to go to the town of Raymond, go
Oh,
to government,
yes.
go to committees, go to comprehensive plan committee, that, if you put that in, that would directly,
So that
Which
seems to
where
me
we-
to be a time saver as well.
Yeah.
I just want to
But-
make that formalized, as that would be a way to
Well,
utilize
I'm hoping to
that.
make it even easier than that, so that they
Easier is
can go
better.
to the Raymond Web's homepage.
Easier is
And
better.
there'll be a button there that will say comprehensive plan, or tomorrow, or whatever the committee wants it to say, to make
And-
it easy.
And then lastly, the 1021 email from Sue about the CPC contact information. Hopefully everybody's seen that. It has telephone numbers and all of our email addresses. So I would say that this would be the formalized process in which we communicate within the committee, and also to capture information that's been posted on the web. So it's more informational than anything else, but I just figured I would bring that up.
okay. That seems pretty clear to me. Brad?
Sure. Just clarification, Peter. That's why on one of your topics there, two areas. Number one, Sue, you sent out an email to us here a month or so ago about that we should communicate through the committee chairs and not directly to staff, that's town policy. And
Yes.
I'm a little confused. When you send us out an email, are we supposed to respond to Kayla or Peter, or reply to you, or reply to everybody? I don't, could you just clarify what you meant in that earlier email, that all of our communications should be through the,
Okay, so
if a staff.
I'll give you for an example. If you're sitting at home reading the RFP and you have a question that has to do with the town, or that you think Nathan might know the answer to, you won't ask Nathan, you'll ask Dawn. If I send you an email, or someone sends you an email, by all means reply to that person.
Tell me that one again. If we had a question, then we should go directly to Dawn as opposed to through
Oh,
Kayla
no, I'm
or-
sorry, yeah, that, I just meant it, I'm thinking the town office, and you would send, if you have a question pertaining to something you're doing on the committee, you should send it to Peter and/or at Kayla, probably both. And then they would determine amongst themselves which one's gonna forward it on to Dawn and CC the other.
Yes, and if we're having already communications, like let's say Sue has sent out our agenda in e-packet and there's discussion on that, you would be replying to all
Yes.
at that point, because we are already all on the communication. I think that makes sense.
And
Unless it's unrelated.
as an example, if there is an agenda item that comes up between now and the next meeting, as long as we've given Sue, let's say, 5 working days notice of that, because she's preparing the minutes and the agenda, then that agenda item would come to Kayla and myself.
Yes.
And then we would get it to Sue, and then it would get placed on the agenda.
Yes.
And as far as it's two ways, as far as communicating with town staff, as I understand it, you would communicate a question for Dawn to Kayla and myself. We would forward it to Dawn. Dawn is going to communicate back to us.
Yes.
And then we will get that information out. Is that
Thank you, Peter.
seem to make sense?
Yes. And that way the chairs can send it to all the committee members if it's appropriate. But where you get into trouble is if a piece of information goes out to all the committee, and then one of you says, oh, well, what about this? And the other one answers, well, I think this, and the next one answers, I think that. That's where you get an illegal meeting on email. And
Exactly.
you can't, so you
Yeah.
can't do that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
Any discussion or questions other than directed to the chairs have to be in the
And if I
meeting.
could, I'd just say that it's these type of housekeeping issues that before we start thinking about going forward with anything else, something as simple as formalizing intra-committee communications, we're really walking a fine line.
Yes.
And so I'll just reiterate, we're now 8 hours into this, and we are taking care of business as far as some of the organizational points that have, to be quite honest with you, that led to some bruised feelings and missed communications. And so what I'm trying to do is simply formalize it with the committee here, get it on the minutes, so that, quite honestly, you know, the sheriff isn't locking Sue up.
Yes. Or I'm having to ask you for all your private emails. That's another thing I would like to ask Kevin, to make each of you a raymondmaine.org email that you use for committee work. And I'm wondering what the committee thinks of that. Yes, I know.
I understand the reason why we would do that, because if there is a request, it would go through all of our email, like our general email, and yes, we would have the opportunity to scrub it out and say that's unrelated, but that's a lot of work. But it's another email.
It is.
That's my thoughts. I have 4 already, and I can't keep them all straight as it is. So, I mean, I can see the benefit.
I would be remiss if I didn't bring it up.
I know, and I think that a lot of people on committees do end up with their own Raymond email address.
I've set them up. Almost no one's using them, to be frank.
Right, but I mean, and so maybe it's something that if you want to use, you could. If you don't, but just keep in mind that a request for information would be your emails.
Yes, and we have had requests for emails. I've got one right now where the searches Kevin did brought back 43,000 emails.
I think that's a fantastic idea, and I think it's an absolute necessity.
Yeah, I'll have Kevin set you all up with one.
Thank you.
I'll leave it up to the committee whether they use them.
Thank you.
Brad?
Yes, I just, again, if I could get some more clarification from you, Sue, regarding this 2 or more people. So are you saying that if a committee meets, because it's going to be probably 3 or more people, then we need to record that? And if the committee has emails in between, we need to retain those? Or what? Tell me what you're saying.
You can't have conversations amongst committee members in email. Is what is really what it boils down
I
to.
think what he might be asking is what we did as a subcommittee. Is
As a
that illegal?
Subcommittee was approved, it's in the minutes, it's reported out in the minutes, and therefore that's totally acceptable.
Yes.
Okay, so having a subcommittee and that's been approved, and we talk about that, we report back to the full committee is
Correct.
okay, Brad?
Yes.
And it's
So-
included in the minutes.
Yes.
Yes.
But what about the emails to that committee, Sue? Because, you know, we're doing more than 2 people on an email. We're doing, in our case, we had, what, 4 of us on there on those emails?
I think that that's an exception because it's an approved thing. It's an approved subcommittee within the committee. So obviously we need to communicate with each other.
And if how
Are we
you
sure?
did it was through email, that's fine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Are we sure of that? I heard you say I think. So I just want to, are you sure of that?
I'm sure of it.
I'm sure
Peter
of
is
it, yes.
sure of it, and Sue is sure of it.
I'm sure of
We are not the only committee that's done a subcommittee.
No.
Lots of committees do subcommittees all the time.
So the
Okay. Without
subcommittee,
recording them or reading the emails. Okay.
Correct.
so the subcommittee for finalizing this RFP, we can communicate via email.
Amongst yourselves.
Amongst ourselves.
Now, but keep in mind, if someone wants that information,
It has to be available.
it has to be
Yes.
available, and they could request all of your emails, which then makes you have to go through all of your emails and take out the ones that aren't relevant.
So I believe that the crux of the situation is this. I can't call 2 committee members up the night before a meeting and say, hey, why don't we vote like this? You can't do that. That's an illegal meeting. So all of those type of communications take place during the meeting with official minutes that are approved by the group. That's how it works. That's my understanding.
Or you can't take an agenda item and have several committee members offline make their decisions and come to the meeting and just say, I motion this, second, everybody in favor, cool, done.
Correct.
With no discussion.
Correct.
And having had your discussion in email.
Correct.
Okay. So is everybody a little bit clear on communications and how it works and what's illegal, what's not? And maybe it would be, even though it is another email, it would probably be in our best interest to use an email address that the town has provided. Sean?
And then just a quick question for subcommittee stuff. Co-chairs don't need to be on that, right? So if it's just 4 of us, then it's just staying with the 4 of us. It doesn't need, you both don't need to be on those emails going out.
We don't need to be. Okay. So next is establishing a task timeline with a comprehensive plan, self-assessment checklist, and growth management plan. Peter, I don't recall, was that my addition or your
I
addition?
believe Jackie asked that question at the end of the last meeting about creating a timeline.
Yeah, I think, you know, we kind of discussed it a little bit this evening about having a planner in place will actually help us finalize something like this. Obviously, we're not going to be able to sit here and come up with an entire timeline for the next couple years, but, you know, I think, you know, if we're, you know, kind of picking our top priorities as far as the next few months look like, you know, does it make sense to try and bullet point some of those items that we're working to achieve over the next couple months, and so that we can kind of get a sense for, you know, working towards accomplishing those goals. You know, for me, it's always helpful to have a framework in place. Honestly, I think reading this was, for me, like, dumbed it down, but was very clear as far as the steps that it takes for us to create this plan. But, you know, if there was some sort of kind of a clear, concise, you know, set of tasks that we're really working towards, it would help bring some clarity, I think, to me as far as what we want to work to achieve each month, or, you know, by certain deadlines.
To Brad's earlier point, I think having the planner on board will probably help a lot with that.
Yeah.
And I think they'll probably direct us.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what the goals should be, so besides the end goal.
Well, I had to learn quick to make up this little handout, and I know it's funny, I had emailed Danelle and been like, I don't know what to put here. Help me out, because I don't, and I think that does speak to the fact that most of us don't really know what all the exact tasks are in the timeline for that. So I think that we, as a group, collectively have a lot to learn and discuss still, and things that we need to dive into, and agreed a planner will help us get there.
Yeah, Kayla, I would echo that as far as what Brad said earlier. This is, when I looked at the makeup of this committee, I was amazed at the diversity of skills and experiences on this committee. As I mentioned at the last meeting, Tom's observation that you really don't need to know this stuff. Maybe your chair needs to know this stuff, but that's it. I don't necessarily agree with that, especially looking at the makeup of this group. But I'll just reiterate that it's that this committee is the oversight of the planner. And so what we have that the planner is never going to have is something like the experience of the tour that we took last week, or the experiences we've had on the lake, or in the Raymond Forest. So it's those type of things that are kind of going to formulate part of what our mission is, which is, as I understand it, it's to protect, preserve, and grow this community within the confines of maintaining its natural resources and its rural community. Now, you know, that's a statement, but, and that's what we need to make clear to the contract planner. And what we do is we have oversight on that. So if we see the planner going in a direction that isn't really in the sense of the best interest of the town from our perspective, and also we've gained that information from the community through interactions and surveys and talking, then that is really our role. So as far as the timeline's concerned, I don't disagree at all with the fact that it's going to be the contract planner that's going to kind of structure that. That's what their job is going to be, and that's why they're getting the big bucks. But we do not in any way give up our role or responsibility to a contract planner as far as the community is concerned. We are representing the community.
So I guess, is it fair to say in the next, month or two, our real priorities are, I mean, we're doing community outreach, we're trying to get the word out and talk to community members, and get their opinions. And then also, a priority of getting a planner in place so that we can create our roadmap. And then I think housekeeping, I mean, obviously we're doing a lot of groundwork as far as organizing how to communicate, who to communicate with.
Yeah, and I wouldn't sell us short. I mean, I personally, I've never participated in a comprehensive plan. I will tell you, after 8.5, 9 hours, I know more than I ever thought I would about a comprehensive plan, and I would assume that goes for everybody on this committee, with the exception of those that have already had the experience of doing it. That being said, like looking at our 2004 comprehensive plan and looking at how our views are going to be different because it's now, a decade and a half or 2 decades later, to rely simply on saying, well, let's just, photocopy the 2004 plan and submit it, that's not going to work either. So my guess is that even those individuals that had experience in the 2004 plan are learning new things. I think what I said at the very first meeting was I don't think PFAS was known in 2004. So we're all learning as far as that's concerned.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So in terms of time frame for working backwards and what we've got set up as agenda items for the next meeting, is the primary goal to lock up the RFP and have that completed by the next meeting? Or are we also trying to answer some of those questions that we talked about that that Sue answered and that Dawn may have may be able to answer as a resource? Is that a part of the next meeting? Is there, or I'm just trying to think ahead if we're talking about getting to the next step.
If we could figure those out before the next meeting, so
Right.
that would be really helpful.
Yeah.
So Sue, is there some way that you could give us a little just chart, like how does the law become a bill, and just say, this is how a budget gets approved?
Yes.
That might be something quick and dirty we could all look at and go, oh, this is what the budget committee does, budget finance committee does, this is what the select board does, this is where it goes to town meeting and gets approved. I believe we're going to probably be doing those charts for just how we get the plan approved. There'll be some sort of graphic that the plan is going to provide for us, similar to what Tom was talking about when he did his presentation from the state. This is how much time you need to get it to me, and then I get it back to you, and Select's got to look at it, and Planning Board's got to look at it, and that sort of thing. So if we could just get a quick and dirty flow chart on that prior to the next meeting. And I guess what I would also say is that I am not part of the subcommittee on this RFP. I will tell you that I've read our draft, and I read all of the 5 examples cover to cover. But also, when similar to the discussion on the election presentation, I would expect that we will, as a general committee, possibly have additional ideas as far as how we go forward with the RFP as well. So it's not like we're abdicating it all to the subcommittees. But I do agree to expedite it. It makes sense to concentrate it into a few people doing most of the work.
So I don't know, we're still sort of stuck. But I think we can kind of work backwards. I mean, we basically know that we won't have money until July 1st, hopefully.
Well, you have 10 grand.
Well, we have 10 grand, but right, but we won't have money for a contract.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Sue, but there's always discretionary dollars.
There is.
So I mean, you know,
The
we
selectmen
could
do
make
have
a
a
pitch
budget.
to selectmen and say, hey, you know, you got $50,000 in discretionary money. We don't want all of it. We just want 20,000 of it. You know, so there's always other paths as far as getting at the money, as was suggested before, the little pots of money here and there.
Yes.
So
Yeah, and I believe Dawn did say a couple of times that that isn't something that should hang the committee up.
Oh, okay, is
Yeah.
the funds,
Yes, it's the
funding,
funds,
okay,
yeah.
okay.
Because it was voted that this town wanted to do this.
Okay.
Well,
Jackie?
and I think it's probably fair to say we probably won't have a planner in place for at least a couple months, 2 or 3 maybe. You know, is there any discussion that we want to have as a committee as far as what our goals should be in the next couple months while we don't have a planner in place?
So I think one thing that we can focus on, which is our job, is community outreach, which also means putting together a very large survey that's inclusive and available to as many people as possible. And I think that that's something as a committee we should be working on, because that is going to drive us in what we're doing. So we, you know, it's great, we can have a planner in place, but if we don't have that solid direction and we don't really know what the town's thoughts and views are, then we've all, you know, we're not in the right place. So I think that some of our tasks, until we have a planner, should be focusing, at least one of them should be a focus on getting a large survey together, figuring out how we want to get that out to the community.
I agree with that. I think another one might be something that we could do, and like I say, it would probably be helpful, excuse me, for clarification for this committee, since it sounds like we all have varying degrees of comfort as far as what our charge is here, would be to at least start hacking out some type of vision statement. You know, in other words, our vision statement presented to whoever finally gets the contract planner's job, that's part of our oversight. So being able to hand them at least a draft of the vision gives them an idea of, oh, this is what these people are looking for. And I understand that a lot of it is cookie cutter or boilerplate. I mean, everybody's going to have the same vision. We want things to be lovely and wonderful and not cost anything. But bottom line is, we may be a little different. We may have some other visions or components of that vision statement that aren't necessarily universal to every planner's thoughts. So that might be another thing over the next couple of meetings, whether it takes a subcommittee or all of us just coming in and submitting a vision statement and then merging them into one that we feel comfortable with, without, you know, having to have 15 meetings about it. Something short and sweet. And I would say, I've read the vision statement from 2004. I thought it was excellent. And that already exists.
Okay. Does anybody else have something they think would be an appropriate task? Brad?
If we're going to do a survey, do think about the extensiveness of it. Some people love multi-page reports. A lot of people just want a one-page, 5 questions. And you're going to get different responses from people depending upon, you know, which type they prefer to fill out. The other part of that is, how are we going to get it to people? And I emphasized on the task force that Kayla and 4 of us were just on, that one of the primary tasks we should try to do on election day is gather opt-in emails from people. Because to the extent that we can communicate with people via email, I think that we had about 1,300 emails that we collected back on the last plan. You may know better than I do, Greg, on that. But we collected them. Every time we met with people, please sign up here, give us your email. And it's going to be a much more timely, effective. If we have to mail out a survey, expecting people to mail it back to us without an envelope postage on it we're going to get a very small response. It's going to get very costly if we have to send out an envelope with postage on it for everybody to send them back. I mean, our $10,000 budget, that's $2,000 to $3,000 there if we send it to every household. So gathering emails, I think, is really, really important. But just for whatever it's worth, meeting with stakeholders, and Frank, this is where I come back to your comment about not wanting to rush this, because there's probably nobody on this committee that's more in favor of meeting with, first off, identifying the stakeholders and then figuring out how to reach them. And I think that there's nothing better than one-on-one or one-on a group of people in person. And we can do some Zoom meetings and others, but maybe just giving some thought to how we might get people to join neighborhood meetings. We weren't very successful at that the last time around, and I think there's great room for improvement. There's a lot of smart people on this committee. One of the things I noticed also when the list of addresses came out is we're very scattered around the community, which is wonderful. Not only do we all have different perspectives on all of what we're looking at here, Raymond means different things to different people. But the other thing is we know our neighborhoods, and we know where the place to have a meeting in the neighborhood might be. So I think maybe just kind of thinking about that. How would you get out in your neighborhood, 20 or 30 people to come? Think about how you might try to organize that. And we could do those meetings over the winter. We can do them in the spring. We can do them in the summer. There's never a perfect time, but there's never a terrible bad time, except for holidays and things like that. So I would add that to something that we might want to kind of focus on. Gathering emails, figuring out how we can get emails from the community. My understanding, Sue, is we do not have any at the town level. Is that correct? Anything formal?
We don't have anything that we don't keep them at the town level, no. But we do have emails from the people that wanted recycling stuff, for instance. We do have emails from people that wanted the Roadrunner. And we could very easily set up a way to have people sign up for getting comprehensive plan information. We can also put surveys on our website, and there are other means of having electronic surveys that we point people to instead of having them return something. The electronic means will aggregate all the results for us. So
I would echo Kayla and Brad's observation that the community outreach is going to be essential. I just refer you to the committee to reading the RFP, the plan, the RFP for Gray that we had got as an example on either the first or the second page. What the town is saying in order to keep the contract planner on track was to say that their 2003 comprehensive plan was rejected by the state as far as being in compliance with their Growth Management Act, because primarily there was not enough community outreach. And that in itself was a reason for the state to deem, I guess, Tom's role, or whoever it was in 2003, to say, this is not compliant because you didn't do enough of that. So once again, making that clear in the RFP, we want, and I believe it is in there several times, that describing that we're going to be doing community surveys and follow-ups and meetings and all that stuff is essential.
Two questions. The planner, does the RFP include survey work with the planner? I can't remember off the top. I don't think so. So I just want to ensure that that's our bucket and not the planner's bucket specifically.
I think in our draft, it does mention the fact that the planner will be involved with communicating with all of the required boards within the town, with the planning board, with the select board, and that also that it is responsible for helping to coordinate, assisting in coordinating community outreach.
But not necessarily the survey piece of it.
Well, not necessarily actually applying the survey.
Okay. That was just a point of clarification for me. Thank you.
Yeah.
The second point is to piggyback off of Peter, the town of Gray, when we were doing our subcommittee, we were looking at some of their materials. They have a pretty slick text set up in terms of how they are reaching their citizens. And they've got this, they've got this little video that you can click on, that animated characters that talks about what a comp plan is. And it's, it's interesting and it's engaging, and it wasn't the most updated, but it's something more than just a handout. It's something to keep people entertained to a certain extent. So to use, I think a big shift between 2004 and now is we have the opportunity to use technology for the first time in a new way that can really help us explain what we're doing and why it's important for people to get involved.
And I would say that's probably a natural progression just with the technology, but it wouldn't surprise me if a lot of that was implemented because of the rejection in 2003 of their plan.
Exactly, and one of the things we did in the subcommittee, we all went out and looked at other towns to see what they had done. And that was when that's when we saw Gray's, and it's worthwhile if you haven't had a chance to go click on other towns' websites and their comp plan areas. It's a worthwhile exercise to really see what was done and what wasn't done. So I'd encourage, as we start to think about community outreach, I'd encourage all of us to go do that.
Sean?
Speaking of technology and videos, does the town have a YouTube channel?
Yes.
It's probably the best way to, yeah, youtube.com/whatever.
Well, YouTube channel, we also have the local access TV.
I think YouTube is going to reach more people.
Well, it depends on how old you are.
That's true.
When it comes to the technology, and we have a great resource in Kevin, and I think
Yes.
we really need to use Kevin, because Kevin would lead us down the right path and how to get to people through technology. And I think he might even get excited about this.
Well, I was wondering too, I mean, is social media an outlet that we can use as a resource as well? I mean,
Yeah.
either the Raymond page, or maybe we can even create
You could have a
a
comp plan
comprehensive
page,
plan page.
A Twitter account.
yes. Frank tweeting.
Frank's gonna run it.
We can put our lies out on Twitter.
And just to throw this out there too, I am also licensed by the FAA to fly drones commercially, which you need that license to do anything that has to do with what we would be doing for a video. So we not take on the whole responsibility, but I can be a resource for creating somewhat good videos.
Yeah, I mean, I think having footage of Raymond from an angle that we are not accustomed to seeing it would be a great way to talk about it. Because realistically, to create a video, whether it's cartoons or a few people talking, what you really need is the footage, and you can talk. It doesn't have to be someone just staring at you and talking. But you could do the voiceover videos and footage of Raymond. So, I mean, could imagine that as a team and using Kevin and all of our resources that we probably could put together social media. We can do all that. We can create a video. We can create more than one video. It doesn't have to be just, we can do, I think that the point is that I don't think there's a limit. And it's a matter of what we're willing to put our time and efforts into. And I think the more community outreach we can do, the better, because we're going to get a lot more community buy-in. And that also means when we come to present this to the community as a whole, most of them will already be on board because they've been involved in every step of that process.
Video sells it, there's no doubt about that. I mean, using a drone and showing people what Raymond looks like from some of the hilltops in this town, I think would blow their mind. Some of the things we saw last week, and including that in a very short video to show people what Raymond is like from the top of the hills, would be amazing, because I don't think a greater percentage will know that, or have seen as many as we looked at the other day.
Okay, I think that it looks like we have actually quite a few things to discuss at our next meeting, and I think we should all try and come back to our December meeting with our own proposed maybe vision statement, ideas for video and outreach, comprehensive survey, spending a little bit more time doing our homework. I did way back when, I think send along a whole list of other towns and their surveys and how long they were and how many responses they got from that. So we can find that again somewhere and look at that as well. Because I did spend some time doing that way early on. And I did find, I think it didn't matter how long the survey was.
I think there are some surveys too that you can create that like start out short, and if you want to continue on with it, it kind of opens up a next set of questions to it. Maybe we could start with some of the basics and, you know, try to gather as much information in those as possible, and those who are willing to sit and continue clicking through, you know, we might get more information.
That would definitely help for those who are doing it electronically.
Yeah.
Hey, Kayla, could you send that email around? I've been searching for it. I can't seem to find it, so I must have deleted it. If you could send that around again, it would be wonderful.
Yep, and then also speaking of that, I took a picture of the time frame that was handed out with the towns, the population, and the bids. Did you get that email? So that you'd have it. It's way late to the discussion, but...
I didn't, you know,
okay.
I looked through emails from you and from Sue before this meeting, and I didn't see that in there. I wasn't looking for it.
I
but
sent
didn't
it to
see
you during the meeting, so you'd have it, because it was a handout
Yes.
in the
I
meeting.
did.
So I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I will. Like I said, I will find that and resend it back out so that everybody can take a look at that.
Okay.
So we're at 8:26. Going back up to the top, I think we've already discussed establishing subcommittees. The development of subcommittees for tasks. I mean, we established one tonight. I think they can be effective tools when we need to get into more depth. You know, even in our little subcommittee that we had last month, I feel like we were very productive, got a lot done in a short manner of time. So I think it would be good for, as a committee, to utilize those as necessary. Our next meeting date is set for December 7th of 2022. I personally find that this is working for me. We haven't set forth any dates past, I think, December. But I am okay with continuing on the first Wednesday of every month. That puts our next meeting January 4th.
I think Sue needs to weigh in as far as what conflicts there might be for that.
On the first Wednesday, there are no conflicts right now. Oh, but there could be, and that's with the school, because they meet on Wednesdays. And they tend to do like every other, so eventually they work around it being the first.
Oh, okay.
But let me get into there. Let's see if the school was in there. And we have nothing in January, so, you know, February and March. So the school hasn't been put in that far in advance.
Can we do it as just a placeholder unless the school has unless we have a conflict? Can that
Yes.
Can that be ours
That can be
on a
yours.
you know, on a month-to-month basis, unless otherwise noted, I guess?
Well, sort of. And the only reason that I am hedging is the planning board already has the second Wednesday. And they get bumped sometimes because of the planning board, because their meetings move. But that's their problem as opposed to ours, actually, so.
Okay.
So yes, I think that can be.
Okay.
So I'm just thinking out loud, which is never a good thing.
So I
And
think
never very coherent.
maybe as a general rule, we can stick with the first Wednesday unless we find that we have a conflict with the school or any other committee, and then we can adjust accordingly if that's working for everybody. All right. I'm not seeing anybody from the public?
That's
or is
Brad.
that?
That's Brad.
That's Brad. Okay. I'm like, who is that? Sorry, I don't have my glasses on.
Brad's coming back in, evidently he somehow got.
I had to reboot. I'm sorry. I was trying to pull up a YouTube Zoom of Sebago Lake that I was going to just send over. I did, before were you getting ready to call for adjournment?
I know we were just discussing meeting dates. Our next meeting is December 7th.
Yeah.
And then moving forward, because we haven't established any dates past then, that we would like to try and keep the first Wednesday of every month unless we have a conflict with the school or planning board or any other committee. So we would address that as it came along. And then
Okay.
I was gonna move to public comment.
But we seem to have no public.
But we have no public. So then I was gonna move on to any additional committee comment. Peter?
Yeah, I just have one quick one, and this is more informational than anything else. I came across a proposal, LD 446, to reestablish the State Planning Office. It's sponsored by the Natural Resources Council of Maine, and whereas we right now have Tom, who is Department of One, and I believe up until around 2014 or so, we had a whole planning office. And I believe that what the Natural Resources Council of Maine is suggesting is, even though everything's in a name, the name is the reestablishment of the State Planning Office. They are not promoting that we add layers and layers of government. There were some reasons why that office was disbanded, and the employees were kind of scattered out to other departments. However, what the council is saying is that they would like to see something similar to resurrect the Land and Water Resource Council, which was a part of the planning office that was lost entirely in the dismantling of the planning board. So they are looking for support for that. It went to the Senate in in June of 2021, and it was voted to pass. And then in July, it was defeated in the Senate and put in the file. I'm told governmentally that means it's dead. I'm just bringing that informationally where we've talked about the planning board in the past, and Tom kind of given the sense that, you know, he's a one-man act, and sometimes it's 2 or 3 months before he can get to something. But once again, what they're looking for support for is the Land and Water Resource Council. So I just bring that informationally.
You know, just an update, it is now a committee of 2.
Oh, they doubled it.
He has a woman who came, she's very experienced. I spoke with her today on plans. So she works from home, but she's on board to help. So
that's
trying to
terrific.
get caught up site and everything. So anyway, I guess we were talking about technology as something, you know, and how to reach citizens in our community and stakeholders, not just citizens in the community, and filling up the time between now and when a planner is secured for the community. Would it be possible maybe to invite Kevin to next meeting to give us some ideas of what he can and can't do or something?
Is it possible? Yes. It's
I mean, he can
it's
join
more
us
a
by Zoom.
it's more a matter of when you have an idea, going to him and saying, how can we do this? I mean, he can do a lot of things given unlimited time and money. So,
Can't we all?
Well, I guess what I'd say is, in the discussion about internal communications, how about we try this out? Let's not put it on Sue. Brad, why don't you send Kayla and I at that request? We'll get in touch with Dawn, and we'll see
Yeah.
if that's something that can happen, and at least we'll put it in Dawn's lap.
yes.
Does that sound reasonable?
Okay, then the other thing, just we're all here, if someone can get the official process for, I know I talked to Don about this back last late June or early July. He seemed to think we had enough money and could do the plan. And what I heard here today or this evening was that no, we can't do this. But every community wrestles with this in terms of doing paying for a plan over multiple fiscal years. So I know there's a solution to it. If we could get that information prior to next meeting from one of you, either you, Sue, or Don, or somebody, that would be helpful information to not have to wait until next meeting. But I'm pretty sure Don knows of a solution to be able to put a bid out for a planner. And Peter, one of the objectives here, I think this task force that's going to be looking at this ought to have is if we can talk to some of the other communities. Harrison has done one somewhat recently. Gray, New Gloucester, Bridgeton, and Wyndham have all done them within the past 5 or 6 years of our neighbors, just to get a sense of how much they paid for their plan. That might, to your question earlier, Peter, that might give some color to how much we ought to be thinking about budgeting.
So Brad, I think, and what I already plan to do was to email Don in the very near future and ask him about more specifics about money. I know it was sort of discussed that we shouldn't let that impede our progress, so maybe he can give us a few short sentences on where we stand and sort of how we should be viewing that process, where we don't quite know how much money we have, but we need to come up with an idea of how much money we want. I think he can help us out with that, and I will definitely have that for your subcommittee as soon as I possibly can. And I also feel perfectly comfortable knowing that we kind of want to know what we can do is contacting Kevin, reaching out to him and saying, here's a couple of the ideas we were just toying with initially. What are your thoughts on that? Do you have any further suggestions or things to add?
And in the discussion, I believe what we resolved to do with the subcommittee is come back with the goal of approving the draft RFP. And my understanding is that will trigger the issuing of the RFP, and that's where we'll get a sense of, what is the range of the budget that we need to be looking at. And did I understand that correctly?
Yes, and then we could take that and go back to the town and say, this is how much we feel we need. Are you okay with that?
Yep.
And can someone get in the interim or by next meeting exactly how we need to advertise this RFP? I mean, could we conceivably identify all the planners in Maine and just email a notice of this to them, or do we have to advertise it and wait 30 days, 60 days?
We had a list.
Yeah, we do.
Get some color around what that RFP requirement is.
Get a resource list.
That would be helpful.
Yes, so we have sort of this list of what other towns have done, and that's what I was referring to, is this was handed out in the meeting, and I took a picture of it and emailed it.
Oh, that's what you meant. Oh, I know where that is. I made it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but there's also a resource list that Sue sent out to all of us.
Oh,
That
okay.
basically listed, I think it was maybe a dozen or so
Yeah.
of
Jumbled up.
That are
contract
currently-
planners.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think what Brad is saying is, can we know what the specific guidelines are to meet the town's requirements for the bid?
Well, and you can send a bid to specific people if you know if they're ones you want to bid.
Yeah.
Or they're likely to give you a bid. We would also post it on our website and probably put it on like the MMA website, things along that line to advertise it, because you never know, there might be one out there that is the most wonderful in the world that isn't one that I stumbled across in my wanderings.
Yeah, and John, I think what you're saying is that Sue did send out, along with that resource list, the town policy.
I think
I think I did.
Brad, is that right? We just want to understand what to
On
comply
bids.
with the town policy, essentially what those guidelines are. That's,
There isn't you have to have it out for X number of days, but you want it out there long enough so people have a chance to see it. And you don't want it to look like we sent it to 4 people, we're closing it tomorrow, and make it look like some kind of backroom thing. Perception is something you have to be very careful about.
Absolutely. Hence the reason why there's a town policy.
Yes.
And why a deadline is a deadline, and you can't open them after 4 p.m. and all that other good stuff.
Well, and that's why when I redid that first page, I did pay attention to, because all the bids should come into the town office and should be date stamped and timed and logged and all that sort of thing,
All
like
that
we do
sort of
for every
stuff.
other bid process.
Yep.
So I think that's something that can be recompiled and put in a little package for your subcommittee.
okay, great.
Any other committee comment? Okay, seeing.
Motion to adjourn?
I need a motion.
Second.
And all those in favor? All right, this meeting has been adjourned.